Tauroth Jeku awoke to the sting of antiseptic fluid and glaring lights. His eyes barely focused on the alien laboratory surrounding him, shining metal slabs, arrays of scalpels, alien glyphs etched into every surface. The last thing he remembered was being aboard the Tyrant's spear, scanning the Qualion system for raiders. Then the Zhyrax attacked, attaching boarding tubes to his ship and dragging him into darkness. Pain laced his entire body. He was upright, strapped to a vertical examination slab. Tubes jutted from his veins, carrying unknown fluids. Then a tall, insectoid, reptilian alien loomed into view, a Zhyrax scientist. Its black, reflective eyes studied him with dispassionate curiosity. With a piercing hiss, the creature jammed a glowing capsule into the IV port in Tauroth's arm. Agony, burning heat spilled through his bloodstream. His muscles clenched. His entire world became a haze of shrieking torment. Minutes, hours, he couldn't tell how long the pain lasted. When Tauroth next opened his eyes, he lay face down on the frigid floor, no longer bound. Shivering, he struggled upright. His limbs felt wrong, heavier and more powerful. The veins in his arms glowed faintly violet. Their fluid swirl felt utterly alien. He scanned the room. A steel door, alien glyphs along the walls, the stench of chemicals. Memories came rushing back. The attack on his ship, the unstoppable Zhyrax boarding parties, the gruesome battles in the corridors. Fragments of horror. His crew. Where were they? He tested the door. Locked. Desperate, he balled his fist and slammed it into the metal. With a deafening clang, a dent appeared. Shock jolted through him. He tried again, and the door crumpled outward, crashing into a pair of Zhyrax guards beyond. Seizing the moment, Tauroth lunged into the hallway. One guard was pinned under the twisted metal. The other fired a green plasma bolt at him, narrowly missing. Tauroth felt new reflexes firing in his nerves. He clamped a hand around the pinned guard's head and smashed it against the deck. The other guard hissed, brandishing a curved energy blade. Tauroth ducked beneath the swing and slammed his elbow into the guard's throat. Unsuspiciously, Tauroth stooped over, pulled up a sheet of sheer glass. He waved. Not my efforts. By now the glass was full. It collapsed, choking. A savage blow ended its life. Heart hammering, Tauroth grabbed the energy blade and a plasma rifle from the fallen aliens. His body still thrummed with strange vigor. The Zhyrax had altered him. The thought churned his stomach, but he had no time to dwell on it. Crouching low, he advanced along the corridor. The overhead lights flickered. Alarms beeped in the distance. Maybe the Zhyrax realized their subject had escaped. He paused at an intersection, hearing approaching footsteps. 3 more Zhyrax troopers, armed with rifles, rushed around the corner. Energy bolts whipped the air. Tauroth dove behind a support column, heat and sparks raining down. A direct firefight against multiple rifles was deadly, but he recalled the blade he'd taken. Taking a deep breath, he launched himself from cover. Plasma bolts streaked toward him. He managed to deflect them with the humming edge of the blade. Electricity crackled across the corridor walls. In 2 strides, Tauroth was upon them. He slashed one trooper across the chest, tossed another aside, and fired the stolen rifle into the third. The bullet wanged through the air. He tried to scoff and hit his face. His Zhyrax collapsed. Panting, Tauroth tried to contain the swirling fury in his blood. The enhancements were fueling him with adrenaline, reflexes, and terrifying ease and killing. But somewhere his crewmates needed him. He pressed on, passing a quarter of observation windows, looking onto a cargo bay. Movement caught his eye. Rows of stasis pods lined a platform below. He squinted. Within the nearest cylinder, he saw the silhouette of a human. Immediately, he headed down a set of stairs. 2 guards flanked the pods. Tauroth fired before they could react, felling both with precise headshots. He sprinted to the nearest pod. Jolden Brusk, his fellow Terran Vanguard officer, was trapped inside, eyes shut in fitful slumber. Tauroth searched the console controls in vain. Symbols crawled across a screen. Finally, he yanked a large black lever, and the stasis fluid drained, depositing Jolden onto the floor. Jolden coughed, disoriented. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Tauroth, you're alive. The man puffed, speech slurring. Tauroth nodded briskly. "We don't have much time. Let's free everyone." He failed. He repeated the process for other pods. More men stumbled out. Krevun Zaroth, the Vanguard weapons specialist, Zhyrax Ron, an engineer, Donis Rill, a forward scout, Barfin Melis, communications officer, and at last their captain, Orton Stormreeve, battered but conscious. Each man bore fresh scars from Zhyrax experiments. Though weaker than Tauroth, they did mesmore Trouts. Nivet, a strong set of Marins. Paris was spoiled alike, from beaten by the Tordskaft clots, Narakov's clods, pun of the Motu. "We need to regroup," Stormmaid said, voice ragged. "Our ship was lost or boarded. We can't let the Zhyrax keep these labs. They'll torture more men." Tauroth handed rifles to whoever could hold one. "We have to shut down security or find a way off this vessel. We're behind enemy lines." Wincing, Stormmaid tested his weight on wobbly legs. "Lead on, Tauroth. You seem to know your way around this alien place." They advanced together, carefully winding through the corridors. Alarms pulsed. Tauroth, relying on a stolen wrist translator, deciphered a sign pointing to a lab operations hub. They slipped inside to find a ring of monitors and consoles. Tauroth pressed the translator device to the main terminal. Despite the flickering screens, he located a schematic of the ship. A dreadnought bristling with troopers, labbed in detention zones. Hundreds of stasis pods dotted multiple decks. The majority of human life signs flickered near the lower levels. Tauroth hammered keys until an alert message flashed. "Manual override. Stasis pods unlocked." A klaxon wailed. "We have to leave now," he said. "I've freed other Terrans across the ship, but that alarm will bring reinforcements. Only I have nitrovium, and Tasha also has nitrovium." Knowing what was coming, he continued to press the buttons. As if on cue, the doors slid open. More Zhyrax troopers stormed in. Plasma bolts tore the air. The men dove behind consoles. Fired back. Tauroth's pulse roared in his ears. He flung a fragmentation-like alien grenade, scattering the troopers in a blast of light. The corridor lights flickered. "Go move," Stormreeve ordered. They slipped out, racing past stunned guards. If their newly freed crewmates could fight, it might cause enough chaos to let them all escape. At a crossroads, they found a cargo elevator that led to a security substation. The men crowded in, hearts pounding. Upon arrival, they forced open the doors and rushed the station. A brief firefight erupted. With savage efficiency, the Terrans gunned down the alien operators. Panting, they sealed the station behind them. The dark expanse of space seemed full of something, but... "Captain," Tauroth said, scanning the consoles. "There's a small hangar on this deck with a few scout ships. If we can secure them, we might get out, but the Zhyrax will converge on us soon." Stormreeve nodded grimly. "We won't leave our people behind. Let's gather as many of the newly freed men as we can on our way." They split up briefly. Stormreeve, Zhyrax, and Arthon went to retrieve other survivors in the nearby corridors. Tauroth remained with Kivon and Jolden, studying security feeds. Flickering images showed pockets of Terran prisoners, half-naked, fighting the Zhyrax with stolen weapons. Many had partial genetic enhancements, enough to stand and fight. Over the next few minutes, more men trickled in, battered but alive. Among them, Kurnath Seld, a devolutions expert, and Brevis Ural, a helmsman. Tattered rags and wild eyes all around. "Enough," Stormreeve breathed once they reassembled. "We have to make a run for that hangar." Together, they set off again. The corridors echoed with distant gunfire and the screech of alarms. More pockets of Zhyrax resistance tried to block them. Each skirmish left the Terrans more exhausted, yet unwavering. Tauroth still burned with enhanced vitality, ripping through troopers with the energy blade. Others followed his lead, galvanized by his sheer ferocity. Finally, they reached the large blast doors labeled Auxiliary Hangar. Zhyrax pried open a control panel, but before he could override it, the door slid open from the inside. A towering Zhyrax officer stepped into view, easily 2.5 meters tall, wielding a crackling staff. Ornate armor glinted along its segmented limbs. Troopers filed in behind, forming a blockade around the row of small scout vessels. the officer's obsidian eyes fixed on the humans, and its voice rasped through a translator. "Terran abomination, you dare pollute our research. This ends now." With a sharp strike of his staff, a wave of kinetic force blasted the humans backward. Plasma bolts raked the corridor, cutting down 2 men instantly. Tauroth's anger erupted. Fueled by the alien serum, he sprang forward, deflecting plasma fire with the blade. The officer met him with a hiss, slamming the staff into the deck. Tendrils of crackling energy coursed out, threatening to pin Tauroth in place. Fueled by the alien serum, he pulled on his supply belt. Gritting his teeth, Tauroth fought through the discharges, barely phased. He was angry now. At close range, the officer's tail whipped around, slashing Tauroth's side. Pain bloomed, but he retaliated, smashing an armored fist into the alien's chest. The officer staggered. Stormreeve and the others poured suppressive fire onto the flanking troopers. The corridor lit with green bolts, shouting, the stench of blood and ozone. Autumn burst from the group, heaving, dark and cold as a sickly night. Armament sliced forward. Stormreeve and the others poured suppressive fire onto the alien's chest. Snarling, Tauroth wrested the staff from the officer's grip. The alien crashed back, exoskeleton cracking. Tauroth swung the stolen weapon, sending arcs of lightning surging over the officer. With a final shriek, it collapsed, twitching. The last troopers crumpled under Terran rifle fire. Much like the earlier fight, the officers remained motionless. Panting, the survivors spilled into the hangar. The scout vessels were small, each large enough for perhaps 8 men in cramped conditions. They began piling aboard. Zhyrax fiddled with the alien controls, while Tauroth used the translator device to override the ignition sequences. The hangar doors hissed open to the star-strewn void. In the hangar screen, he scrambled to his sides, ready to abandon his friends to their fate and doom solely. For just as they lifted off, more Terrans flooded into the hangar, dozens who had escaped from stasis pods in other sections, their terrified faces lit with desperate hope. Tauroth's conscience reeled. "We can't leave them." He waved from the hatch. The pilot hovered the craft as the men clambered aboard, filling every spare inch. Captain Stormreeve gave a grim nod, letting them squeeze in. Outside, more Zhyrax troopers pelted the hull with plasma. Tauroth leapt to the open ramp, discharging the stolen staff. Lightning arced across the hangar, scattering the aliens. "We're over capacity," someone shouted. "It is now or never," roared Stormreeve. The hatches sealed, engines flared. The scout ships blasted out into space. Plasma batteries on the dreadnought spat sizzling beams, but the nimble ships zigzagged away. A Zhyrax corvette pivoted to intercept. Tauroth pushed the engines to their limit, weaving in and out of flak bursts. Tauroth's heart lurched in his chest, but the corvette's aim was off. Moments later, they cleared firing range. Some men cried in relief. Others nursed wounds or lay slumped in exhaustion. Captain Stormreeve slumped into a seat, face lined with grief for the fallen. Tauroth, still clutching the alien staff, tried to quell the turmoil in his veins. He had become something beyond human, and he wasn't sure if he'd ever be fully normal again. Zhyrax's voice crackled over the ship's comm. "We have a short-range jump drive. Might get us a system over before we lose power." "Bye. Let's load." Stormreeve nodded. "Do it. Then we'll call for help. The Terran vanguard must learn of this Zhyrax threat." Tauroth peered out the viewport as the dreadnought dwindled behind them, a dark shape against the stars. Anger fluttered in his chest. They had captured him, tortured him, turned him into a weapon. And in so doing, they had unleashed an unstoppable will to save his crew. His gaze lingered on Captain Stormreeve and the men who'd survived. Each was battered, scarred, but unbroken. As the star field twisted into white streaks under the short-range jump, Tauroth silently vowed that humanity would answer this atrocity. The Zhyrax had tampered with the wrong species. Humanity would rise, stronger and fiercer than ever, carrying an unbreakable fury that burned like the heart of a dying star. They soared into FTL, leaving the nightmare vessel behind, but Tauroth knew their battle had only just begun. For now, though, he let himself breathe, heart still pounding in triumph. They had escaped. They had saved as many as they could, and they would return, determined to ensure humanity's place among the stars, free from Zhyrax tyranny, fueled by a spirit that refused to be extinguished. Humanity, huh? Yeah,